Welcome back to Durka. Last time we were here we did the Acre and the Alexandra. This time we will be travelling down Durka Street, past the Durka Mill, and up Prince Charles Street to the Albany, the largest single-storey weaving shed in Oldham. And whilst we are here, it'd be rude not to do the Granville. Designed by Abraham Henthorne Stott Sr., the Albany was built in 1884 and was located on North Road, now Vulcan Street. It produced velvet until 1920. Soon after the mill opened, a bitter dispute began, and it was well covered in the Cotton Factory Times letters page.
Sir, in your last issue there appeared a letter bearing the signature "One on Strike," reflecting on our association and especially on myself as its secretary. He states that the 4 onlookers working in Oldham are knobsticks, who hail from Darwin, and that I sent them there. If your correspondent, however, had taken the trouble to see corroboration before rushing to print and hiding his identity under a nom de plume, he would have found that only one is a member of the Darwin Power Loom Overlookers Association.
The DPOA was a trade union representing junior supervisors in textile manufacturing in Lancashire. In the same issue, another person replied to One on Strike.
Sir, the only point that seems to be the issue was, who was to be the master, and I think the man who finds the money ought to be. Another statement made was that he was only paid for 1/2 of what they made piecework. I have made careful investigation of the matter and find this is false. A man who sends false statements to the press, willfully and maliciously, to mislead and poison the mind, is cowardly beyond measure. This same man forgot to tell your readers that he has been repeatedly warned by the outlooker and weaver about broken picks, and he did not make the loom right. The consequence was that the piece was ruined, and the overlooker was fired for his incompetency. Was the master justified or not for giving this man notice? Not according to the rules of the unions. Yours respectfully, Peter Bradshaw. In answer to Peter Bradshaw, I am a little surprised to hear him preaching up trade union principles. I took him for granted that he was a society man, but now that I've found him out, I shall treat him how he deserves.
The strike went on for at least 5 weeks, including this article in the Manchester Evening News. Mr. Nuttall, the One on Strike, was charged with knocking over Peter Bradshaw and calling him a knobstick, then with several others brutally kicked him. The defence was an alibi, and the case was dismissed. In 1888, they were out on strike yet again, but this time with less newspaper interest. 1920, velvet production ended, and the mill was sold to the Oldham Paper Staining Company, who turned to wallpaper manufacturing in 1935. During the Second World War, the factory was converting to make jettisoning fuel tanks. Faced with wartime metal shortages and a need to extend the range of fighter craft heading to Europe, the British came up with an ingenious design for auxiliary drop tanks, making them out of resorcinol glue-impregnated craft paper, which, while having excellent tolerance, characteristics for extreme heat and cold necessary for operation on an aircraft as well as being waterproof, the glue would slowly dissolve from the solvent effects of the fuel contained within the tank, developing leaks within a few hours of being loaded with fuel, making them strictly a one-time use item, filled right before takeoff. After the war, the Albany became a warehouse until it was demolished in 1976. The site is now industrial units. Crossing Vulcan Street and heading back down Prince Charlie Street, we find the Granville Mill, built 1 year later in 1885. In March 1888, we get our first reminder of how dangerous the mills were. Fatal accident at Granville Mill. On Friday, between 10 and 11 o'clock, an accident occurred to a boy named Joseph Tyther, aged 15, who resided at Osterlands and is employed as a little piecer, working under William Howarth at Granville Mill. Pieces were usually the older children in the textile factories. Starting from 6 years old, these boys and girls started as scavengers, crawling beneath the mule when it was at rest, and cleaning the mechanism from superfluous oil, dust and dirt. If they survived this, they could be promoted to piecers, who walked along the mule, catching up the broken threads and skillfully reuniting them. At the time, the boy was cleaning between the mule carriage and the roller beam, and had stopped the mule carriage, as he thought. Whilst at this work, the mule carriage recommenced moving, and came in contact with Little's head, crushing it seriously against the roller beam. The unfortunate youth was at once removed to the infirmary, where he died on Sunday morning. An inquest was held on the body at the Roebuck Inn on Monday afternoon. Daniel Lees Tyther, 37, said his son had worked 17 months at the Granville Mill and for the same minder. He had never mentioned that he had had to clean when the machinery was running that he could remember. Walter Scott Street, minder at Granville Mill, said the deceased worked for him, but he was absent when the accident happened, and that he did not allow any cleaning between the fixed and traversing machinery when in motion. The verdict of accidental death was returned. May 1902. Mr. Robert Bradbury, who has been at the mill since its commencement in 1886, accepted the position of manager of the Gem Spinning Company, Chadderton. There was a large assembly of workpeople. The presentation took the form of a silver-mounted pipe and a marble timepiece of an artistic character bearing a silver plate. In early November 1915, a battalion of 1,150 men, raised in Oldham, arrived in the Albert and Arras sectors of northern France. This map, from 1916, shows the town of Albert in the bottom corner, and the red lines represent the trenches and the front lines. By 17th February 1916, the Oldham comrades had suffered losses, as reports began to appear in local newspapers. These included Lieutenant Murdoch, nephew of Oldham's coroner, Sergeant Major Gartside, son of a member of the Saddleworth Board of Guardians, and Sergeant Major Coop of Acre Lane, where the Alexandra Mill stood. Private George Brierley, 27, Fisher Street, who made cores that are used in making metal castings. Private Walter Smith, 19, Belmont Street, a bottler at Oldham Brewery. Private William Fothergill, 18, Under Lane, a piecer at Raven Mill. Private William Schofield, 43, Kenwood Road, a piecer at Fernhurst Mill. And Private Fred Thompson, 19, from Durker Street, who was a piecer at Granville Mill. The Granville Mill ceased production in 1954 and was slowly converted into industrial units. In April 1999, a malicious arson attack threatened the lives of the 50 workers that were in the properties at the time. The massive fire that required 18 fire engines and over 80 firefighters to tackle caused extensive damage to the building, estimated in the multi-millions. The 25-page report from specialist fire investigators based in Rochdale was finished in September 1999 and handed to Greater Manchester Fire Service chiefs, who will now pass it to police to try to track down the culprits. As a result of the fire, Granville Mill was demolished and replaced with another housing estate. Thanks for embarking on another adventure with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your insights, theories, or your own historical tidbits below. Let's keep the conversation alive, even when the episode ends. Your comments make this journey richer.